Hi everyone, I'm back Kesim. I'll present a series of a case-based studio experience studied in Central Anatolia designed to analyze local building strategies. The cases were tracked as a post-stage of the theoretical framework or PhD study on place atrophy and implemented in the educational process to the studies in the Department of Architecture at Abdullah Gül University for third year and master design studios. Placemaking and place deprivation are two essential phases of urbanization. Urban geography is not only composed of places but also potential places and non-places that are there in the urban environment as the outcome of anti-places. This coexistence of places and anti-places is still the major problem in urban design, as in many cases of the central Anatolian cities. The presentation will start with a short theoretical introduction about urban place deprivation and continue with distinctive cases. Now, let's delve into the nuances of those seemingly identical terms. Urban place deprivation is the name of the phenomenon here. Anti-place is the designated outcome that exploits the character of places. This unintended coexistence is the anti-design solution which distorts the surrounding built formation together. Place atrophy is the process, purposeful designation of anti-places that absorbs the significance. Designing hybrid places is a challenge of resettlement upon a rich urban geography full of tangible and intangible natural and architectural heritage, making it necessary to merge places and anti-places which would cause place atrophy. Taking account of the coexistence problem of settlement makes us design a series of studio cases. We obtain distinctive results regarding the design of the settlement strategies, morphogenetics, and character of this geography throughout the spatial research process. The model on the slide is the abstract representation of how we approach the cases. It's the entire city model of Antakya produced by third-year students. In the model, the built environment is abstracted like a natural topography with apartment heights. On the other hand, public open spaces are extruded like rectangular apartment buildings. So we invert the urban morphology to convert our perception to improve our cognition. Unfortunately, 2 years after this model was made, Antakya region was torn down and atrophied by a devastating earthquake. Urban atrophy points us to the places that need care. Not only earthquake, migration, war, and pandemics, but also urbanization by itself creates an anti-places needs to be redesigned as well. The purposefully made anti-places absorbs the significance of the surroundings that coexisted. While urban place deprivation is the main motive behind the design behavior, not every artifact has to be a place. In turn, anti-places are actually the potential places for urban design projects. Sometimes design fails to solve. It fails because there are no alternatives likely left behind. Building drains the potential environment. In his artwork, Ahmet Doğu İpek reflects the philosophy behind our motivation. He repeats dark cities and dark moods his works in which he depicts the giant buildings, giant messes which are the new owners of the cities we live in. Leave a dystopian effect on the one hand, and on the other hand, open the door to a hopeful future. The hybrid coexistence cultivated the character of places by creating atrophy. The earliest stages of the studio were composed on this theoretical framework. After the theoretical introductions, the studio works focus on rethinking the local building strategies. It's explored under 4 modes corresponding to the atrophied feature of place. Now, let me define the most common cases one by one, giving some sample scenes. Spatial symbolic atrophy is a spatial or a symbolic loss in features of place that may be shifted or atrophied. The simplest form of spatial atrophy is abandonment. Abandonment of buildings and settlements for a reason. Then, anthropological shifts in urban design come next, such as gigantism, miniaturization, or futurization. Cookie-cuttered buildings might be the most common design disease because of feeding the benefits of construction-based economy and de facto expectations of so-called comfort and comfortable life. So it produces boring cookie-cutter urbanism and an urban environment with sameness. Also, cloning Duplication and fake iconic settlement strategies for place marketing are usually to be seen even in any district. Contextual atrophy is the loss of context that is composed of space and time. It's a more complex form of abandonment, such as historical leftovers and ruins. Inarticulation of heritage to the contemporary settlements is a form of contextual atrophy. It will be the most common problem here in design problems of this geography. This controversial coexistence will be also the main focus of our studio works waiting to be solved. Because contemporary forms of architecture sometimes degenerate the urban context, they coexist together. By degrading the meaning, this coexistence ends with the atrophy in the contextual feature of that place. Furthermore, destructions created by war, earthquake, fire, flood, and restricted military zones, and also chemical, biological disaster areas would be in this category. The temporal atrophy means that context, space and time, and meanings of place are cloned to make new places. This form of atrophy has been one of the most studied modes in design literature. Pseudosynthetic places, place theming, subutopias, Disneyification, replication, fake architecture, copied and pasted urban forms, museumization, touristification, and pornscape are some of these design attitudes in temporal atrophy. In further, so-called adaptive reuse, other directed places are a bit designerly way of doing the same attitude. The place where we made the studio works is somehow a similar settlement. Abdullahgül University campus is also an adaptive reuse project settled in the place of Sümerbank textile factory established in 1930s. Rather than a holistic transformation, different architects presented their so-called adaptive reuse attitude on various buildings on the campus. For instance, you see two cotton warehouse buildings restored. One is designed for administrative units by dominating the historic warehouse. The other is transformed for academic activities with a conservative attitude. This is also another coexistence problem after the transformation. The experience of a place can never be the same, just as stepping into the same river again is impossible. This is the most comprehensive form of place atrophy covering context, meaning, and experience. As the lived-in experiences evolve concerning the transformation of human and environment in relationship, we are brought to a new level of consciousness for the environment in which we live. The hybridity of place and anti-place pregnant for new patterns of spatial experience, such as in the urban fringe. The experiential atrophy may sometimes result in new patterns of experience, such as a roadside that can be used as tavern. The transformation of the ontological features in urban formation is also counted as experiential atrophy that results in lost urban and architectural entities. For instance, the design and features of a public street have always been in transformation. Throughout this transformation, we lost an archaic urban design element called orthostat. Today, what we call streets are most likely to be designed between shopping malls rather than paved city centers. Greco-Roman streets, modern boulevard, and American parkways all provide different experiences merged with the idea behind the street. Even though Marc Auger called malls are non-places, such linear formations between malls are more likely to identify streets as the places of new behavioral patterns in urban design today. After all, our concern in studio works is the rehabilitation and reformation of new life patterns in the contemporary urban context. For sure, we can also observe successful rehabilitation strategies, even trustification carried out meticulously in some instances. Yet, rehabilitation also brings hardcore technical adaptation problems in design, such as the sewage system. Particular architectonic reformations would sometimes create adaptive results, but if disturbing urbanism is the case, we are stuck most probably. This project is a third-year architectural student's trial to find out morphogenetic strategies on cookie-cutter urbanism, but could not pass the abstract stage. The actual cases in urbanism are much more complex than particular architectural problems waiting to be solved. What if we can solve the distinctive morphological parameters in urbanism, may find a chance to cultivate the morphogenetic character of the place and reproduce it? So, this challenging attempt becomes our master design studio's objective, concentrated on rehabilitation and reformation of such places. Apart from several unsuccessful attempts being not able to pass the abstract stage, an attempt named geomorphism to generate the solutions for the disturbing urbanism does let us show the roots of the design strategies. Geomorphism is a design research attempted to sustain isomorphic structures together with the natural and/or built landform. The field of study was an old settlement at Ağırnaz, Kayseri. It is thought to be the birthplace of Mimar Sinan, Sinan the architect. The whole settlement area has also integrated with a halfway discovered underground city. To be honest, there are two distinct urban structures intertwined, an underground city and an above-ground city. Both possess different mappings and socio-spatial organizations serving various purposes and being utilized by diverse ethnic groups throughout the history. At first, we prefer to identify three layers of settlement, starting with caves. First, the underground landform was designed to settle, then buildings were placed in front of caves, and then the new floors and urban patterns start to be emerge upon the topography. Then, we discovered that the settlement morphology is transformed due to the vertically settled environment in three layers. There are underground formations and buildings on topography, but there is also a third layer providing a geomorphic interface in between them along the topography line. Volumes transform when they go beyond the topography. The whole structure is like a geomorphic design indeed. Finally, we decided to separate this morphologic typology into four. The first layer is the deepest form of caves and carvings. The second layer is a geomorphic interface belonging from caves to buildings. The third layer is the buildings settled upon the topography. Then the secondary architectural formations are set up upon buildings as floors. Even so, this division is not enough to comprehend the settlement morphology as well. We have distinctive patterns of settlements that cannot be explained with legal construction rules and legislations. For instance, sometimes this fourth layer is used as a semi-public passage extending beyond plots. These extended plots are distinctive ownership units constituting family complex plots. They have a kind of three-dimensional semi-private ownership between units. There are also in-plot semi-public streets and in-parcel semi-public spaces. Let us start with caves and carvings in detail. Caves are like rhizomatic structures. They are the rooting settlements here. We achieve four distinct design elements named the rhizome, interface, joint, and niche. After making typomorphological analysis of the caves, depending on their volumes and placement strategies. Rhizome, interface, joint, and niche are the settlement strategies that will reflect themselves in also the above-ground urban form discovered in later stages. After the modulation of volumes, we reach 13 different rhizomatic structures. Here, we try to achieve the expanding rules of underground settlements and find a chance to reproduce them. This model is reproduction of cave settlements, even if it will necessarily expand depending on such a topography. The red ones represents the places where caves touch the surface. Here, interior and exterior design strategies of buildings were studied separately. As a geomorphic structure, building units are manifested as the interface between caves and continuous streets. Buildings are the interfacial volumes going beyond the topography. Here you see sample design strategies from the generated rule sets of volumetric compositions. If you see the whole geomorphic structures as a habitation, architectural units will constitute a rectangular gallery in form after the main cave gallery. Only the morphology has transformed, but the spatial composition was the same while the habitation grew from the ground. The typomorphology of building design strategies is analyzed from plans and facades separately, yet in search of the expanding strategy on facades, we are unable to find distinctive rule set for it. The urban pattern is the final formation in the settlement area. Working on the streets and open spaces, we generated prototypical model for Mimar Sinan Street and surrounding plots, assuming that there will be a logic behind this morphology. Also, it's expected for the second stage of the studio work to make speculative projects for the evolution of the habitation design to the following generations, which are not going to be presented here. You see the initial expanding strategies of street units here are unable to be applied as organic as to the field. It left quite prototypical. However, achieving two-dimensional and three-dimensional prototypical model representing the settlement codes was productive for the upcoming stages of the studio. Also, the same prototype is generated for plots and parsas ready to be regenerated with the rule set defined under the current map shown with the red mark. Urban place deprivation is reasoning the design behavior. Places need care, but entire places need ultimate care in urban design. They are potential places for urban design. Entire places transform the public character of places, and those places must be rehabilitated and reformed rather than restored to sustain the architectural entity, knowledge, and experience behind them so as not to deprive them of their heritage. All in all, we have a distinctive design strategy under the philosophy of geomorphism, which is identified with 4 abstract stages as rhizome, joint, interface, and niche, coherent with the morphogenetic heritage of the existing artifacts. So, reproducing the design strategy is an attempt at sustainable urban design in Central Anatolia. Also, instead of stereotypical urban design projects, the characteristic settlement in Central Anatolia evolves through ontologic metamorphosis, articulates, accumulates, and grows through relatively organic progress.